Welcome back, everyone. If you enjoy dramatic transformation stories, emotional family conflicts, and unexpected twists, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and check out our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Your support helps us continue creating new content every day. Now, settle in as we jump into today's unforgettable story. It all started because I made one stupid mistake. I slipped a few small items into my backpack while I was walking through a department store. I honestly thought nobody had noticed. I figured I'd get away with it, learn my lesson, and move on. Instead, it completely changed my life. My punishment wasn't grounding. It wasn't losing my allowance. It wasn't being forced to do chores. My mom decided that from that day forward, I would have to live part of my life as a girl. How long would this punishment last? I had absolutely no idea. Every time I asked her, she simply smiled and refused to answer. It was like she enjoyed watching me wonder if this nightmare would ever end. She couldn't exactly send me to school wearing dresses, not without creating a huge scandal. So during school hours I could still wear my normal clothes. But the second I walked through our front door every afternoon, everything changed. The first thing I had to do was change into one of the dresses she'd bought specifically for me. It didn't stop there. Every outfit came with matching lingerie, stockings, a bra, slips, heels, and makeup. She insisted everything had to match perfectly. If my lipstick wasn't applied correctly or my makeup looked sloppy, she'd make me wash it all off and start over. My real name is Mike. But according to my mother, that name didn't exist whenever I was dressed up. When I was wearing a dress, she only called me Melissa. If I forgot an answer to Mike, she'd immediately correct me. No, she'd say with a smile. Melissa. I hated hearing that name. What terrified me even more was the thought of someone from school finding out. I imagined one of my classmates seeing me through a window, or finding one of the pictures, or somehow hearing rumors. If that happened, my life at school would be over. I'd never hear the end of it. The worst day so far had been my 14th birthday. Instead of inviting my friends like every other kid my age, Mom refused to let me ask a single one of them. Instead, she invited several women she worked with. I had no choice but to greet them wearing one of my fancy dresses. The entire afternoon felt like one long joke at my expense. They kept complimenting my appearance in exaggerated voices, telling me how adorable I looked, asking me to twirl around so they could admire my outfit. Every laugh felt directed at me. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Then came the presents. I secretly hoped someone might have brought me a baseball glove, a video game, or maybe some sports equipment. Instead, every single package contained another dress. Some were pink, some were floral, some had lace, others came with matching accessories. Each gift only reminded me that my punishment wasn't ending anytime soon. Months passed. I stopped looking forward to anything. Summer vacation, which had always been my favorite time of year, suddenly filled me with dread. School had been my only escape because at least I could dress normally there. Once summer arrived, I'd be home nearly every day. That meant spending almost every day as Melissa. I quit the softball team because practices were after school, and Mom always insisted I come straight home. Soon I stopped hanging out with friends altogether. Whenever they invited me somewhere, I always made up excuses. I've got homework. I'm sick. My mom won't let me. Eventually they stopped asking. The loneliness became almost as painful as the punishment itself. Then there was my little brother, Danny. Before all this happened, I used to tease him constantly. Now the tables had completely turned. Every single day he laughed at me. He'd make fake curtsies whenever I walked by. He'd call me big sister. Sometimes he'd sneak into my room while I was dressed up and snap pictures with his phone. One afternoon he grinned and waved the phone in front of me. If you ever mess with me again, he warned, I'm sending these pictures to every single one of your friends. I believed him. So I never touched him again. Our parents had divorced years earlier. Normally I would have told my dad everything. But Dad wasn't really around anymore. He hardly ever visited. Even if I managed to tell him, I doubted he'd do much more than argue with Mom before disappearing again. That would only make her angrier. And when Mom got angry, my punishments always became worse. Then something unexpected happened. Dad called. He wanted to spend the weekend with me. Just the two of us. Camping, fishing, sleeping under the stars. For the first time in months, I actually felt excited. I'd finally get 2 whole days where I could just be Mike again. I counted down every day until Saturday. Part of me expected him to cancel at the last minute. He usually did. But this time he didn't.
Saturday morning finally arrived.
I jumped out of bed feeling happier than I had in months. Then I looked at the clothes laid out neatly across my bed.
My happiness disappeared instantly.
There, carefully arranged, was the exact same pink chiffon party dress I'd worn on my birthday.
Beside it sat matching high heels, pantyhose, panties, a bra, a shiny pink satin slip, and a tight girdle. I stared at the outfit in disbelief. There was no way. Surely Mom wasn't expecting me to wear that in front of Dad. My heart started pounding.
"Mom!"
I shouted.
She appeared almost immediately, as though she'd been standing outside my bedroom waiting for me to react.
She smiled calmly.
"Is something wrong?"
I pointed toward the bed. "I can't wear this." She looked at the outfit.
"It looks perfectly lovely."
"Mom, Dad's coming. I can't let him see me dressed like this." She stepped closer.
"Why not, Melissa?" "Because he'll know. He'll know you've been making me do this."
Her smile barely changed. "I've actually been thinking about that." I swallowed nervously.
"What do you mean?" "I don't want your father causing unnecessary problems," she said casually. "So when he arrives, you're going to tell him this was entirely your idea."
I stared at her.
"What?"
She folded her arms.
"You'll tell him you enjoy wearing dresses. You'll tell him you like makeup. You'll tell him you asked me to buy these clothes because this lifestyle makes you happy."
"No." The word escaped before I could stop it. "I can't say that."
"Oh yes," she replied calmly. "You certainly can. It's only a little white lie." "I won't do it." She shrugged. "That's exactly what I'm going to tell him." Then she leaned closer. "And honestly, who do you think he'll believe?
Me?
Or a frightened little boy standing in a pink party dress?"
I felt tears burning my eyes. "I won't lie."
"I won't." The slap came so suddenly I never even saw it coming.
The force knocked me backward. My cheek burned. She stood over me, no longer smiling.
"You will do exactly what I tell you. If you don't..."
She paused just long enough for the threat to sink in.
"I'll invite every single boy from your old softball team over here. I'll tell them to bring cameras. They can take as many pictures of you as they want. Imagine those photographs being passed around school. Imagine everyone laughing. Is that really what you want?"
She turned around and calmly walked out of the room. The bedroom door clicked shut behind her. I collapsed onto my bed. I couldn't stop crying. Dad had always been proud of me. He came to my games. He cheered louder than anyone else. He bragged to everyone about what a great athlete I was becoming. Now, he'd probably think I'd chosen this. He'd probably never look at me the same way again. The thought broke my heart. I couldn't see any escape anymore. Sometimes I honestly believed Mom intended to keep this going forever. Maybe she'd eventually enroll me in a school that allowed me to attend classes dressed as Melissa. Maybe everyone would find out. Maybe no girl would ever want to date me. The future looked completely hopeless. Dark thoughts kept racing through my head. I imagined growing up trapped in dresses forever. I even pictured myself someday standing in a white satin wedding gown, squeezed painfully into another uncomfortable girdle, saying wedding vows to someone while people whispered and laughed behind my back. The image made me feel sick. But there wasn't any point delaying the inevitable. With trembling hands, I picked up the lingerie from the bed. One piece at a time. I slowly began getting dressed. I had barely managed to pull the satin slip down over my shoulders when my bedroom door suddenly swung open without so much as a knock. Danny strolled inside as though he owned the place. Startled, I immediately grabbed my dress and held it tightly against my chest, trying to cover myself. He leaned against the doorframe with the biggest grin on his face. Well, he laughed. "There's my beautiful big sister." I glared at him. "Get out." He ignored me completely. "This is going to be the best day ever," he said with a chuckle. "I seriously can't wait to see Dad's face when you walk downstairs wearing that fancy pink dress. Then Mom will tell him it was your idea to dress like this." "Shut up." I snapped. "Just leave." He simply laughed harder. Knowing he wasn't going anywhere, I finally gave up trying to hide. I stepped into the dress and carefully pulled it up over my body before reaching behind my back for the zipper. Danny smirked. "Need me to zip you up, Melissa?" "I can do it myself." The words came out automatically. The moment I said them, I wished I hadn't. It sounded so ridiculous. The embarrassing part was that I really could zip it up by myself. After months of practice, fastening dresses had become second nature. The zipper slid smoothly into place. Danny burst into another fit of laughter. "Oh wow," he teased. "You've gotten really good at that." Ignoring him, I adjusted the skirt, smoothing out the fabric before tugging gently on the slip underneath so it wouldn't bunch up. I fluffed the skirt the way Mom always insisted I should. Danny watched every movement like it was the funniest comedy show he'd ever seen. Normally, having my little brother laugh at me would have made me furious. Today, I honestly didn't care anymore. Compared to what I was about to face downstairs with my father, Danny's teasing barely mattered. If watching me made him happy, let him watch. Nothing could make this day any worse. I turned toward my mirror. The blonde wig waited patiently on the dresser. Reluctantly, I picked it up and settled it over my head, adjusting the strands until they framed my face exactly the way Mom liked. Then I reached for the lipstick. Carefully twisting the tube open, I began applying it with slow, careful strokes. When I finished, I sat down at my vanity. Without even thinking, I tucked my skirt neatly underneath me before sitting. Months ago I never would have done something like that. Now it happened automatically. Another habit Mom had drilled into me. Danny noticed.
"You've really learned all the little lady tricks."
I rolled my eyes. He wasn't finished.
"I wonder what your first boyfriend will be like, Melissa."
I didn't answer.
"I bet he'll be tall."
Silence.
"I bet he'll tell you how pretty you are."
I stared into the mirror.
"I bet you two will park somewhere after your date."
He puckered his lips and started making loud kissing noises.
More, more, more.
I clenched my fists.
Every instinct told me to yell at him. Instead, I forced myself to stay quiet. Reacting only encouraged him.
Just then Mom appeared in the doorway.
"Danny," she said firmly, "that's enough. Leave your sister alone." He laughed one last time before racing down the hallway. Mom stepped inside my room and looked me over carefully. Her attention immediately focused on my makeup. She leaned closer. "The lipstick isn't quite even." She picked up another brush and began making tiny corrections. Then she blended a little more powder onto my cheeks.
"There," she said with satisfaction.
"You need to look especially pretty today."
The reminder made my stomach twist.
"Mom."
She continued adjusting my appearance.
"What is it?" I looked toward the hallway to make sure Danny was gone. If somebody has to wear dresses.
I hesitated.
Why can't Danny do it too?
She raised an eyebrow.
"I think he'd make a wonderful little sister."
She laughed softly.
"Oh, don't be ridiculous, Melissa. Danny could never look as graceful or feminine as you." "I'm not feminine."
She smiled knowingly.
"Really?"
I crossed my arms. "No." She walked over to my closet and opened the door.
"Let's see." Pretending to search through the clothes hanging inside, she began reading them aloud dramatically. "Oh look. Here's a beautiful white chiffon dress. And this one has an adorable pink sash." She held it up with a smile. "Tell me, what could possibly be more masculine than a lovely white chiffon dress?"
I sighed.
"Mom, you're the one making me wear these."
She folded the dress neatly.
"Perhaps."
Then she looked directly into my eyes.
"But I think you're beginning to enjoy it."
"No, I'm not." "Aren't you?" There was no point arguing. She always twisted every answer until somehow she won. Instead, she opened her jewelry box.
"Put these on." She handed me a delicate necklace, matching earrings, and a bracelet. After fastening everything into place, she sprayed a light floral perfume around my neck and wrists. The sweet scent surrounded me instantly. "There." She smiled proudly. "Perfect." A few minutes later she asked me to stand in the middle of the room. "Turn around." I slowly spun once. Again. One more time. She examined every detail. Finally she nodded with approval. "You look absolutely lovely."
She smiled warmly.
"Your father is going to be impressed."
I almost laughed.
Impressed?
No. Ashamed.
That's what he'd be. He'd see me dressed like this and think I'd willingly become someone else. And then I'd have to lie straight to his face and tell him this entire situation had been my own choice. The thought made me feel sick. How much longer could this continue? Weeks? Months? Years? Sometimes I reminded myself things could actually be worse. At least I was still allowed to wear boys' clothes at school. Although even that freedom wasn't complete. Whenever I didn't have gym class, Mom sometimes insisted I wear a girdle underneath my regular clothes. Thankfully nobody had ever discovered it. Not yet. Every day I lived in fear that someone eventually would. As I waited for Dad to arrive, I noticed another fashion magazine lying on my nightstand.
Mom seemed to leave new ones in my room every week.
At first I'd refused to even touch them. Lately,
I'd caught myself flipping through them whenever I was bored. I hated admitting that.
I opened the magazine absent-mindedly. Page after page displayed elegant spring fashions. One dress immediately caught my attention. It was made from bright lime green satin covered with tiny white polka dots. The dress had a wide scoop neckline, puffed short sleeves, and a sash attached at the waist that tied into a large bow at the back.
The design made the skirt flare beautifully.
Without meaning to, I found myself imagining how it would move while walking.
I quickly turned the page.
The next outfit featured a flowing chiffon dress covered in soft lavender and violet flowers.
Its draped neckline looked delicate and elegant.
For a split second I imagined running my hands across the lightweight fabric as it swayed around my legs.
Another page. Another dress. This one was completely different. Short. Slim-fitting.
Black with crisp white cuffs, a matching collar, and a narrow belt. The material was slightly sheer, revealing the white satin slip underneath.
I found myself studying it longer than I should have.
The slip almost looked prettier than the dress itself. It made me wonder why anyone would spend so much effort making beautiful lingerie only to hide it beneath another layer of clothing. Before I realized it, I was imagining myself wearing that outfit.
The thought shocked me. I slammed the magazine shut.
What is wrong with me?
I muttered quietly.
Disgust washed over me. Maybe Mom had been getting inside my head after all.
A knock interrupted my thoughts.
Danny poked his head into the room. Dad's here.
My heart immediately began pounding. This was it.
I took one deep breath before walking into the hallway. Hidden around the corner, I listened as Dad stepped through the back door. "Hey, sport," he called cheerfully as he greeted Danny with a hug. "Hi, Dad. Where's Mike?" My father's voice carried through the house. "We've got a camping trip waiting." "Where's my number one son?"
Danny immediately burst into loud laughter.
Mom couldn't hide a smile either. Then she looked toward the hallway where I stood frozen in place. In a cheerful sing-song voice, she called out, "Michael, come on out." I tried to calm myself before stepping into the living room, but it was impossible. Every breath felt trapped inside the tight girdle wrapped around my waist. My chest felt heavy, and my legs were shaking so badly I thought I might collapse before I reached the doorway. I had never felt humiliation like this before. If I could have disappeared in that moment, I would have. Keeping my head lowered, I slowly walked into the room.
I couldn't bring myself to look at my father.
The silence that greeted me was almost unbearable. Nobody spoke for what felt like an eternity.
The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Finally, my father broke the silence. "Mike." His voice sounded confused more than angry. "What is this supposed to be? Some kind of prank?"
I still couldn't answer. He stared at the pink dress, the heels, the wig, and the makeup. "Why are you dressed like a girl?" I opened my mouth, desperate to explain the truth.
Nothing came out.
Before I could gather the courage to speak, my mother interrupted.
"Go ahead, sweetheart," she said pleasantly. "Tell your father why you're dressed this way." I swallowed hard.
The words tasted like poison.
I
like wearing dresses."
My voice barely rose above a whisper.
"I like dressing like a girl."
The reaction was immediate.
"What?"
Dad's voice thundered through the house.
"Why would you ever want that?"
Slowly I forced myself to raise my eyes.
The expression on his face crushed me.
He looked pale, disappointed, almost sick.
It was as though everything he believed about me had shattered in front of him.
I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that none of this had been my choice.
Instead, my mother continued speaking before I could say another word.
"I don't understand it either," she sighed dramatically.
"It breaks my heart, but he insists this is who he wants to be." She gently rested a hand on my shoulder. "He even picked a new name."
Turning toward me, she smiled.
"Go on, dear. Tell your father. What do you like to be called now?"
My eyes dropped to the floor again.
"Melissa." Dad stared at me in disbelief. "Melissa?"
His voice sounded almost hollow.
"What are you trying to be?" Before I could respond, Danny couldn't resist joining in. "That's exactly what he is," he laughed. "He loves pretty dresses. And makeup. And acting like a girl."
My face burned with embarrassment.
Then Mom spoke again. "Why don't you show your father the lovely outfit underneath your dress?"
She smiled as if she were asking me to show off a new toy.
Lift your skirt just a little so he can see your lingerie.
With trembling hands, I instinctively reached toward the fabric. Dad immediately shouted,
No.
His voice echoed through the room.
That's enough.
He pointed toward the hallway.
Go upstairs.
Take those clothes off.
Put on some jeans. Right now. Hope flooded through me for the first time all morning.
Maybe this nightmare was finally ending. But Mom calmly shook her head.
I wish he could.
She sounded almost sympathetic.
Unfortunately, all of his boys' clothes are in the wash. So this is all he has to wear this weekend. Dad's expression hardened. Then forget it. I'm not spending the weekend camping with someone dressed like this.
He turned toward Danny. How about you?
Want to come fishing instead?
Danny's eyes lit up instantly.
Seriously? Absolutely. Before Mom could object, Dad motioned toward the front door.
Come on.
Danny raced outside without hesitation.
Mom opened her mouth to protest. Dad silenced her with a single glare. Before leaving, he looked at me one final time. For a moment it seemed like he wanted to say something. His jaw tightened.
I ought to. The sentence never ended.
He simply turned around and walked away. I couldn't bear to watch him leave. A few seconds later I heard the front door close. Then the sound of the car engine.
Moments later, the car disappeared down the street. The camping trip I'd spent weeks dreaming about was over before it had even begun.
Mom let out a cheerful little laugh. She slipped an arm around my shoulders.
Well, she said brightly, wasn't that exciting?
I completely lost control. Tears poured down my face.
I hate you. The words escaped before I could stop them. I never want to see you again.
Without thinking, I ran. The skirt bounced around my legs as I sprinted through the front door.
Looking back now, it seems ridiculous. Running away from home while dressed in a party dress and heels wasn't exactly the smartest plan. But I wasn't thinking. I was devastated. Blinded by tears, I hurried down the sidewalk without paying attention to where I was going. Then I heard someone call my name. Mike.
I froze. Slowly I looked up.
Standing only a few yards away were several boys from my old softball team.
Every one of them went to my school. For months I'd lived in fear of this exact moment. Now it had happened. One of them stared at me in disbelief. I knew it.
Another laughed. I told everyone I thought I saw lipstick on him once. So it's true. You really dress like a girl.
Within seconds they were all laughing.
They surrounded me from every direction.
Insults flew through the air. Some mocked my appearance. Others laughed uncontrollably. Fear rooted me to the spot.
One of the boys reached forward and snapped the strap beneath my dress.
Another grabbed at the edge of my skirt. Someone else reached for the zipper on the back of my outfit.
The situation spiraled out of control almost instantly. I shoved one of them away.
They pushed back. For a terrifying moment I thought they were going to rip the entire dress apart. Then suddenly someone forced their way through the crowd. It was my mother.
She grabbed at the boys, pulling them away one after another. Stop!
She shouted.
Leave my son alone.
Eventually the crowd backed away. I stood there trembling.
Then, to my complete shock, Mom looked directly at me with exaggerated surprise. Oh my goodness.
She covered her mouth dramatically.
Michael. What are you doing wearing a dress?
She stared at me as though she'd never seen me before. And look.
You're even wearing lipstick.
The boys burst into laughter all over again. Now they believed I'd chosen all of this myself. It was the perfect lie.
They had everything they needed.
Rumors. A story.
And if they wanted proof, Danny still had plenty of photographs.
Back inside the house I completely broke down.
Still crying, I wrapped my arms around Mom without even thinking.
She gently patted my back.
There. You didn't really mean it when you said you hated me.
She smiled.
You're probably just feeling emotional. Back in my bedroom she sat me in front of the mirror once again. The crying had ruined my makeup. Patiently she fixed the smudged mascara and reapplied my lipstick until everything looked perfect again.
There. She smiled proudly.
Much better. Then her eyes landed on the fashion magazine lying open on the bed. The page displayed a sleek black dress with sheer sleeves and elegant white accents. I saw that exact dress in a shop downtown, she said excitedly. You would look absolutely stunning wearing it. She held the magazine up beside me, comparing the picture with my reflection. I think we should buy it. It would be perfect for your first date.
She laughed softly.
Some lucky young man wouldn't be able to take his eyes off you.
I stared blankly at the floor. Sure. My voice sounded empty.
I guess I might as well date boys. What girl would ever want someone who already looks like one?
The words slipped out before I realized it. Mom didn't answer. She simply smiled.
Part of me wondered if she was already planning her next step. Maybe she'd eventually convince the school to let me attend classes dressed this way.
Maybe the rumors would spread so far there'd be no point pretending anymore.
Only that morning I'd imagined spending the weekend fishing with my father, sleeping under the stars, and forgetting all of this for a while. Instead, everything felt as though it had fallen apart. It seemed like the version of myself I had known was disappearing a little more every day. The days that followed felt strangely repetitive. Each morning another carefully chosen outfit waited on my bed.
Sometimes it was a simple daytime dress.
Other times it was something far more elaborate, decorated with ribbons, lace, or layers of chiffon that seemed completely out of place in our ordinary house. Every new outfit made it harder to remember what life had been like before all of this began. Little by little, the role my mother expected me to play started consuming every part of my daily routine. I kept wondering how much longer it could continue, and whether anyone would ever believe the truth if I finally found the courage to tell it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps the channel grow and lets us know what kinds of stories you'd like to hear next. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. We release fresh stories regularly, and supporters on Patreon get access to exclusive content and early releases before anyone else. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.